The film opens with a scene in a house that appears to be underwater. A man named Charles narrates a story about a princess he loves and a monster that threatens to tear them apart. The scene then shifts to Baltimore in 1962, where Elisa Hospito, a mute woman living alone, often spends time with her neighbor, Charles, who resides in a small apartment above a local movie theater. Elisa works as a janitor at Occam Earth Bio's research center alongside her friend, Zelda Fuller. During their night shift, a vessel carrying a valuable asset is brought into the facility. As Elisa approaches it, something unexpectedly strikes the container from the inside. The next morning, after work, Charles takes Elisa to his favorite bakery, where he regularly buys lime pies despite Elisa's dislike for them. However, Charles enjoys both the pies and his conversations with Pega, a man revealed to be attracted to the same gender. In reality, James works as an art director for a major company and once designed an advertisement for Jell-O. However, his uncontrollable drinking habit led to a temporary suspension from his job. Back at the research center, Elisa and Zelda are cleaning the restroom when Colonel Richard Strickland enters, splashing water after washing his hands before using the urinal. Moments later, they hear screams from another room and Strickland emerges with 2 fingers missing from his left hand. Elisa and Zelda are assigned to clean the blood in the room where the new asset is being held. While mopping the floor, Elisa finds Strickland's severed fingers under a shelf and carefully places them in a bag to be sent to the hospital with him. Elisa soon discovers that the asset is a humanoid amphibian. Fascinated by its beauty, she begins sneaking into the containment area to spend time with it. Over the following days, she feeds it boiled eggs, teaches it sign language, and plays music recordings for it. However, when she hears someone approaching, the creature hides. It turns out to be Strickland, who has come to torment the asset, shocking it with a cattle prod out of spite for what it did to his fingers. Meanwhile, Strickland's home life is revealed. He is married with 2 children whom he barely acknowledges. When his wife initiates intimacy while their kids are at school, he treats her harshly to the point of resembling an act of cruelty rather than affection. Elsewhere, a newly assigned doctor at the facility, Robert Hofstadter, is secretly a Soviet spy named Dmitry. He meets with his superior, who takes him to a Russian-themed restaurant to discuss the asset. Robert informs his contacts that he believes the captured creature is highly intelligent and capable of communicating with humans. However, his superiors order him to poison the asset to prevent America from advancing its scientific research. Meanwhile, General Hoyt intends to use the asset's body for experimental research in pursuit of new technology. Fearing for its safety, Elisa confides in Charles about her plan to help the creature escape. Charles initially dismisses the idea as reckless, but Elisa sees no difference between herself and the creature. Both are outcasts in a world ruled by human greed. Later, Charles returns to the bakery and engages in a friendly conversation with Pega. However, when he reaches out to touch his hand, Pega reacts angrily. His hostility escalates when an African-American couple enters the shop, prompting him to rudely throw them out before doing the same to Charles. Elsewhere, Elisa inadvertently attracts Strickland's attention when she deliberately spills a glass of water in his office, forcing him to clean it up. Upon realizing she is mute, Strickland initially attempts to seduce her. Fortunately, Elisa resists and quickly leaves, rejecting his advances. Then Charles, who initially did not want to help, eventually changed his mind and decided to help Elisa. Using his artistic skills, he decorates a van and fabricates a fake ID. Elisa sets their plan in motion by disabling a security camera before sneaking the asset into a laundry cart and wheeling it away. At the same time, Charles enters the facility, while Zelda, preparing to leave for the day, realizes what Elisa is up to. Meanwhile, Robert prepares to carry out his orders, but inadvertently discovers Elisa's escape plan. Instead of stopping her, he decides to assist. He cuts the power using an explosive device and sedates a guard with a syringe. Strickland, sensing something is wrong, rushes to the exit, but he is too late. With help from Zelda and Robert, Elisa loads the creature into the van, while Charles sabotages Strickland's new car to slow him down. Elisa brings the asset to her apartment, keeping it in her bathtub with a mixture of chemicals provided by Robert, along with salt to maintain its health. The following night, as she leaves for work, Strickland interrogates her and Zelda but finds no leads, forcing him to leave empty-handed. Meanwhile, Charles, exhausted from caring for the asset, eventually falls asleep. The asset emerges from the bathtub and notices one of Charles' cats. The cat hisses at it, and in response, the creature lets out a low growl before brutally killing it. Charles wakes up in shock at the gruesome sight. When Elisa returns, Charles explains what happened. As she rushes to check on the asset, she finds its space empty and panics. She eventually discovers it wandering inside the movie theater below her apartment and quickly brings it back upstairs to tend to it. The asset then touches Charles' head and arm, causing his body to glow with a soft blue light. The next morning, Charles wakes up to find new hair growing where he previously had none, and the wound on his arm is completely healed. This suggests the creature possesses healing abilities. As time passes, Elisa and the asset grow closer, even becoming physically intimate in the bathroom. Elisa floods the room so they can float together, but this causes a leak in the theater below. The theater owner forces Charles to open the door and drain the water. Elisa plans to release the asset into the canal, where the heavy rainfall will flood the area. However, her attachment deepens, and she imagines herself in an old-fashioned musical sequence, singing about her love for the creature. Meanwhile, General Hoyt arrives at the facility, furious over the situation. He punishes Strickland for his incompetence and gives him 36 hours to recover the asset. On the day of the planned release, Zelda notices that the asset scales are beginning to peel, and they are running out of chemicals from the facility. Elisa and Charles decide to retrieve more that night. Elsewhere, Strickland follows Robert to his usual meeting spot with his Soviet contacts. When the agents shoot Robert multiple times, Strickland intervenes, killing them first. He then grabs Robert, who is bleeding from a bullet wound to the face, and tortures him for information, believing he is hiding the asset for the Soviets. However, Robert refuses to speak until the end. Strickland then goes to Zelda's house, interrogating her and her husband, Brewster. When they refuse to talk, his frustration pushes him to rip off his own still-healing fingers. Zelda remains silent, but Brewster, terrified, finally reveals that Elisa took the asset. After Strickland leaves, Zelda scolds Brewster before quickly calling Elisa to warn her. Elisa and Charles rush to get the asset out before Strickland arrives. However, Strickland soon finds a clue and note on Elisa's calendar revealing their plan to release the creature into the canal. Elisa and Charles finally arrive at the canal and bid farewell to the creature. It prepares to return to the water. Before leaving, the asset signs to Elisa, promising that their love will last forever. The touching moment is abruptly shattered when Strickland appears, striking Charles before shooting both the asset and Elisa. Believing he has won, Strickland turns to leave only for Charles to rise and punch him in the face. The asset then miraculously heals itself from the gunshot wound. Stunned, Strickland calls it a god before being slashed to death by the creature's claws. As the police arrive, the asset carries Elisa into the water. Charles and Zelda watch helplessly as the creature kisses Elisa, using its healing powers to revive her and transform the scars on her neck into gills. Elisa awakens and the two embrace underwater as Charles narrates the ending, saying that they can now be together. And with that, the film concludes.